Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier. Now, in looking at the infamous Night of the Long Knives, when Hitler ruthlessly set about ridding himself of key opponents, let's remind ourselves of what exam questions might cover relevant to the Night of the Long Knives, because it was very important in Hitler's consolidation of power. There is the nature, extent and treatment of opposition, the use of legal methods, the use of force, and there is the propaganda value. And yes, I'm including legal methods and the propaganda value in the murder of people. So let's look first at the nature and extent of the opposition. Well, let's not forget that Rome stood at the head of the 2 million strong paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party. Some put their numbers as high as 3 million. They were armed, but not so well armed as they made themselves out to be, and they were nowhere near as well trained as the Reichswehr. Still, they were a threat to the Reichswehr and to Hitler. And if Rome took control of the Nazi Party, which was conceivable given the fanaticism within the ranks of the SA, it would be a very different party, and the Reichswehr and the traditional elite, the traditional right, would have a fight on their hands, very possibly civil war. I hope I made this clear in my looming showdown video. So let's next look at Hitler's use of force and consider his claims to legality. Right up to the final crisis, brought about, remember, by the traditional right, Hitler's thinking was on the lines of removing Rome of his position as head of the SA and holding him in custody, along with some of the other leaders, but not any longer. In the early hours of June the 30th, Hitler flew to Munich, where he first arrested those SA officers he found there and packed them off to prison. Hitler then drove to Bad Wiese and personally arrested Rome, who he found fast asleep, with putches in Berlin and Munich supposedly planned to be underway. Fast asleep. Some were dragged outside and shot. Rome was taken back to Munich and put in Stadelheim prison. It's said that Hitler had given Rome the opportunity to end his own life, giving orders for a gun to be left in his room. But when Rome declined the offer, he was shot on sight. As other SA leaders arrived in Munich for the long pre-arranged meeting of the SA, they too were arrested. When Hitler met up with some of them personally, it's said that such was his fury that spittle was dribbling from his mouth. At midnight they were taken to a forest and shot. Now clearly the thing to note here is on what grounds were the SA leaders arrested? What was the evidence? His accusations were wild. For example, that Rome had received 12 million marks in bribes from the French to overthrow him. The other thing, of course, was that Hitler didn't bother with a trial. Back in Berlin, Göring was in charge of matters, aided by Heydrich and Himmler. Some 150 SA leaders were rounded up and shot. Others to whom the Nazis held a deep grudge also fell victim to the purge. Schleicher was shot on his doorstep, his wife as well. He had said that Hitler was unfit to be Chancellor, but his murder, along with another top general, also served as a warning to the army. Gregor Strasser too was killed. He had broken with Hitler when Hitler refused to join a coalition other than as Chancellor, and he had been very critical of Göring and Himmler. Gustav von Kahr's body, he was the Bavarian state commissioner at the time of the beer hall putsch, was found in a swamp near Dachau. He had been hacked to pieces. The leader of Catholic Action was murdered, a warning for all Catholics to stay out of politics. Amazingly, Papen survived. He was placed under house arrest. But his closest associates weren't so lucky. His principal secretary was shot at his desk. The total number killed is unknown. The Nazis put it at 77, but other investigations have put the number much, much higher. Somewhere between 150 and 200 seems more likely. In any case, most of the killings were over by July the 1st, when Hitler hosted a tea party in the Chancellery's gardens. Now, it is very clear that what unfolded was murder as a result of personal vendettas more than anything remotely associated with a plot against Hitler, though this could, after due judicial process, be defined as treason. On July the 2nd, Hindenburg sent a telegram thanking Hitler for his determined action and gallant personal intervention, which had nipped treason in the bud and rescued the German people from great danger. The Defence Minister Blomberg had already issued a statement to the army that praised Hitler's soldierly determination and exemplary courage. The cabinet felt the events necessary for the defence of the state. So the traditional elite, the traditional right, were on board. Hitler had won their support for what amounted to mass murder. Hitler told the cabinet on July the 3rd that the example he had given would be a healthy lesson for the entire future. He had stabilised the authority of the government for all time. The cabinet then agreed the draft law for the emergency defence of the state that read, "The measures taken on 30th of June and 1st and 2nd of July for the suppression of high treasonable and state treasonable attacks are, as emergency defence of the state, legal." So, the legality was declared after the event, a fair trial apparently seen as unnecessary. In a speech to the Reichstag on July the 13th, now a chamber without any authority, a chamber consisting almost exclusively of Nazis, and a chamber without 13 of its members after the events of June the 30th to July the 2nd, Hitler gave further justification for the events. "If anyone approaches me and asks why I did not resort to the regular courts of justice, then all I can say is this: in this hour I was responsible for the fate of the German people, and thereby I became the supreme judge of the German people." And he gave a chilling warning. Everyone must know for all future time that if he raises his hand to strike the state, then certain death is his lot. Hitler had become the law. Now let's be clear on what we have seen here. Hitler had put himself above the law, but so too in giving them their full support both before and after the event had the traditional elite, the traditional right. For political opponents of Hitler, from the left, the centre, or those from the traditional right, appalled by what had unfolded, there was simply no way for them to express that opposition in any legitimate way. The rule of law was a thing of the past in Germany. they had to take their opposition underground, and that made it so much harder to organise. Now, before I go, could I ask you to please give this a thumbs up if you found it useful, and to please sign up to my channel if you haven't already done so, and tell your friends about it too. Spread the word for me. Thank you so much for listening, and the best of luck with your studies. Cheers.